Over the past year, school unrest across the country has led to the destruction of property worth millions of shillings. There has been a spate of arson in schools across the country in recent weeks, with the latest occurring in a dormitory at a school in Kisii County following Education Cabinet Secretary FredMatiangi's visit to the institution. The students went on the rampage to protest the 2-week term extension announced by the Cabinet Secretary. Another case of arson occurred at Ngara Boys High School in Kisii, where students burnt down 7 dormitories. As a result, Cabinet Secretary FredMatiangi now says 3 students have so far been arrested and charged, even as the Education Ministry continues with the crackdown of vandalism in schools. Speaking during a prize-giving day at the Ngara Girls High School, the Education CS described it as a vice that must be rooted out completely from students' minds. While attributing the increased cases of arson to students gambling in sports or being unfairly treated by teachers, he emphasized the need for everybody to take responsibility for their actions.
It's okay to love our children, but we also have to ensure that we discipline them. Because love without discipline is a recipe for disaster. And people who are not disciplined, and I want our children to know this, people who are not disciplined are going nowhere. You have no future if you are not a disciplined person. And that's why our position remains the same. And frankly, on this particular one, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to persuade me. For the last 5 or 6 years, we've lost a lot of resources in student unrest and in cases where we have instability in schools and students resort to very destructive behavior. Let me tell you, one county in Kenya, one county, in the last 4 years, one county has lost 64 dormitories to fire and so on. And the reason why this has continued is because we think that is how people should live. So, people engage in destructive behavior. We look the other way. We look for resources. We repair those buildings. We don't even arrest them. We do not charge them in court. So, our levels of accountability have remained very low. Everyone must be called to account.
The CS urged students to concentrate on their studies, as their actions will have a long-term effect on their lives.
There's time and season for everything. There's time for you to study, and there's time for you to do other things. So saa hii wazazi tumelipa fees, musome. Basi endeni mukasome, and we are ready to teach you. But it cannot be eti sasa kazi yenu ni kuchoma vitu alafu tuanze kupembelezwa eti sasa tuwasamee. Hapana, you belong to jail. That's what will happen to you.
His sentiments were echoed by Youth and Gender Cabinet Secretary Cecily Kariuki, who encouraged students not to resort to vandalism for their grievances to be heard, but to focus on what brought them to school.
You're here today. 4 years from now, you are in another space. It will be expected in that other space, you also become somebody with a positive DNA that helps to carry on. Even when we seem to be saying Kenyans are like this, that one of you can stand up to be counted to say Kenyans can also become like this. Kenyan students and Kenyans youth can be able to say we don't have to resort to violence for us to be heard. I'm very pleased, again, to the school management and your parents, because I seem to be hearing the few girls I spoke to here have dreams that 20 years ago a girl would have found it very difficult to begin dreaming. One said she wants to be an engineer, and I said, go for it. The other one is going to be a doctor, I said, go for it. The other one said she's on the softer side of issues, she wants to be in commerce, and I said, that is my field, go for it. It's very pleasing that you have defined your space in an otherwise very, very discouraging environment.
In the meantime, the Education CS further indicated that he will not stop his impromptu visits to schools across the country. Matiangi explained that he is doing his job, and this is one way of him knowing the challenges being experienced in various institutions.
I walked around the school on that Friday morning when I came here and looked at the fence and the exposure that our children are subjected to on account of a very weak perimeter fence on that side. So next time you hear people complaining about my impromptu visits to schools, tell them that is how I get to know the challenges schools face. I wouldn't have known that if I didn't come here. That day, I remember I called up my colleague and my sister, Cicely Karaoke, who is in charge of youth. And you know the National Youth Service is her responsibility. And she graciously agreed to immediately mobilize the National Youth Service to assist us. In fact, I want to tell you good people who are here, I was so touched by how she took up the matter. She sent the National Youth Service team here the same day I called her to do an assessment, of this fence. And actually this morning, again, this is why it's always good to have smart and good colleagues. She has given me more ideas about what we need to do and how we need to pull in our two other colleagues, our cabinet colleague in charge of environment, Professor Judy Wahungu, and our colleague in charge of water, so that the four of us can look at how we can collaborate to deal with this environment and deal with this perimeter fence to secure our children.
He further reiterated that no public resources will be used to repair destroyed structures and urged school boards of affected schools to fund the repair works.
We will not use public resources to repair the infrastructure that has been burnt by the students, because that is bad manners. In fact, instead of going to spend that money to repair the roofs in interior, I would rather spend that here and build that dining hall for these children. Because we are accepting bad behavior and bad manners as a way of life. We argue all the time. The parents in this audience, you know that. If every time we had a difference in our homes, we banned the home, there would be no home in this world.
The Education CS also ruled out reintroducing corporal punishment in schools to tame growing indiscipline and unrest in the schools.
I don't think we should go that way. I mean, we've come so far as a country in terms of the governance infrastructure we have created, the governance environment in our country. We are a civilized society. We've come so far. We honestly can't have that debate now about corporal punishment. That is not on anyone's mind. No, not on my mind anyway. Are we so uninnovative that we cannot sit down and manage our children effectively? We don't confront issues and discuss them conclusively. We sometimes resort to blaming one another. We start pointing fingers. We sometimes resort to some hopeless political discussion. Yet the issues are so clear and they're on the table.
Matiangi challenged school boards to convene meetings with parents, teachers, and students on how to tackle the growing unrest. He has directed that boards of management hold meetings in schools within the next 7 days to assure learners of their safety and listen to grievances the students could be having. He also directed that transfer of students from one school to another shall be sanctioned by the Sub-County Director of Education. This applies to public or private schools. The government had in 2001 and 2008 set up task forces to inquire into the causes of student unrests and made recommendations which it continues to progressively implement. According to the statement from the Education CS's office, the latest efforts to address the problem was done at a congregation of stakeholders chaired by the then Cabinet Secretary Professor Jacob Kemenyi at the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development on the 30th of July last year to discuss the same. The new move by the CS is without a doubt set to curb the increase in arson attacks and will be a game changer in handling disputes between students and schools management. For Parastatal TV in Nairobi, I am Kamau Wanjiru.